I'm so pleased to welcome back Christy Roberts to At Midlife Unravelled. She shared with us a couple of weeks ago all about grief and trauma and her very personal experience. This time, she is back to share some top tips on how to deal with special occasions, how to deal with the celebratory periods that we have coming up with Christmas and New Year. And as it is Grief Awareness Week from the 2nd to the 8th of December, we thought it was a great time to share these with you. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Midlife Unravelled, Christy.
Thanks so much.
It is lovely to have you back. We had an episode a few weeks ago talking all about grief. Now, between the 2nd and the 8th of December, it is actually Grief Awareness Week. And I'm very conscious that this time of year, we're also coming up to Christmas, New Year, holidays, festivities, all that kind of thing. And if you are dealing with grief, this can be an extremely painful time. What tips do you have for somebody experiencing grief at a time when everybody else is celebrating and getting out there and having fun?
Yeah, so firstly, I want to say that what happens when special occasions are looming, and there's so many dates, there's so many anniversaries and special occasions, and that it's kind of that first year, especially after a loss, if it's a loss of a loved one or a relationship breakdown, or even if you're estranged from family members or someone close to you, every significant date, it's like, it hits you in the heart, and it's not unusual. So my son's birthday is the 3rd of December. It's actually in National Grief Awareness Week. And I know for me, around mid-November, about 6 weeks before Christmas, so a couple weeks before his birthday, for me, I start feeling it's like, I'm coming into that season again. Yeah. And so I've had to learn ways to sort of work with that energy, and I've got a whole heap of tips here on what to do. So the first thing is to understand, especially, for Christmas or, those special occasions, Easter's another one where there's a real expectation to show up on special occasions, like culturally, there's an expectation that we're going to show up, that we're going to be happy, that we're going to contribute, because that's the way that we've always done it in the past. And so it can be really useful. Tip 1 is to understand that you have free will. You have free will. So you might decide that it's too hard and that you don't want to participate this year, and that can be okay. Yeah. So that's the first tip. You don't have to do something because you've always done it that way. The second tip is to really consider and look at the way that you think you're going to show up, because if you can, this is the tip, remove expectations of how you're going to show up, because you might really fear the day in advance and then on the day you'll be fine. That's absolutely happened to me. Yeah. Or you might feel like you're going to be okay and then on the day you might be a mess and really overwhelmed by your grief, and it can blindside you. And that's happened to me as well. So you can swing between happy, sad, angry, relieved, like it's all normal. So there's no sort of right way or wrong way when it comes to grief. So just understand that, don't get attached to, it's going to be the worst day ever, because it doesn't have to be the worst day ever. Yeah. If you set yourself up for success, and I'll give you some more tips of how to do that, you can actually have a really nice day. I'll talk about that in a bit more. But with the emotions, for example, they can be like waves. That can be a nice way, or a roller coaster. Yeah. But waves is a nice metaphor, because with a wave, they kind of peak and they trough. And then you want to be riding that emotion all the way into shore. So whatever comes up, grief is very organic, and it will just be what it is at that time. So you might be okay, you might not. So the more you kind of fear in advance or dread in advance, the harder that's going to be. So that's tip 2.
I think also tip to take away any expectation that you have to show up in a particular way, that, like you said, grief being like a wave, you don't really know how that's going to carry you into shore. You may be on a dumper. It may be a dumping wave. It may be a lovely smooth ride. But I feel also
Yeah.
to release the expectation that you feel that you have to show up in a certain way by just it is going to be what it is, and we'll get through what we can get through. But to release that expectation, I think is super important too.
I love that, Anita. I love that you added that in because, we consider anger to be
Mm,
bad. We consider sadness to be bad. They're not bad. We can express them in bad ways, but
yeah.
anger, sadness, they're all normal, natural, healthy emotions.
Mm,
It's whether we're expressing them in healthy and resourceful ways. So, for example, if you're feeling really angry, it's okay to feel angry. But if you're shouting and getting into arguments, that's not healthy. That
yeah.
doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve anybody else. So, learning ways to deal with the anger can be really useful. The third tip that I have is to have an exit strategy. So, when it comes to grief, and we talked about this in the last episode, grief is really tiring. It's very
Mm,
heavy energetically in our body, it's quite draining. And so, being around people can really deplete our energy, especially when it's already low.
yeah.
So, it can be useful to have an exit strategy. Now, that could look like arriving somewhere and just saying, well, just knowing or having a plan for leaving. So it doesn't mean you have to leave, but if you get overwhelmed, you want to know that you can. You don't want to feel stuck.
I
So
love
you
that.
might arrive and you might say to the host, oh, I can only stay a short while. But then if you stay longer, it's a bonus.
Mm,
So if you're really struggling with energy as well, I wouldn't recommend hosting events
mm,
unless you can get some support in
yeah.
because there's no exit. You're stuck there until the last person leaves. So I wouldn't recommend hosting events if you're struggling with your energy. The other thing is you do need to ask for what you need because people um, normally they want to help. They genuinely want to be there to support, but they actually don't know how and they can't read our minds and they don't
Yeah.
necessarily know what we need. So learning to ask for what you need and finding your voice can be quite useful.
I think also it's
The
just
fourth,
when you were saying about the hosting, it made me think that it may be that you've always hosted. So people see that as the
mm,
normal thing. And
mm,
unless you actually speak up, like you were saying, and say, actually, I need support, I need help, people would just assume that, oh, we've gone back to how we normally do it. That's great because it's more comfortable that way. I know where I stand, where, do need to speak up and say, actually, I need help. I need support. Everybody bring food. You can you can be here, but I might disappear upstairs at any stage. And to set that up for you, so set
exactly.
up those strategies around you to make it work for you.
Yeah, yeah, you have to ask for what you need. And if
Mm,
you don't say it, you don't want to be in regret or feeling resentful or
yeah.
feeling that everyone's taking advantage of you or feeling unsupported or alone or misunderstood. You do need to use your voice.
Mm,
That's really, really important. And you can cancel Christmas.
yeah.
It'll be there next year.
Exactly. It's one day. Like it's one day. We can just move
Yeah,
on.
that's it. Yeah, that's it. The another tip, number tip 4, is that no is a complete sentence.
I
So
love
if
that.
somebody is like, say for example, it's Valentine's Day or it's your anniversary, you've lost your spouse, and someone doesn't want you to be alone, but you actually just want to be alone,
Mm,
or they might want to take you out for dinner or something, and you really don't want to go, you can say no. And
mm,
no is a complete sentence. So they might be coming from this really genuine place of trying to support you. And it could be, oh, but we don't want you to be alone. Or, we know that such and such would want us to be there for
mm.
you. You don't have to go into why. You just know, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. No, not this time. So no is a complete sentence. You don't have to people please and you don't have to justify
Yeah.
why. So that's a boundary. No. It's quite okay to say no, even if it's coming from the best of intents. If it's not
Mm,
what you need, it's okay to say no.
yeah. You need to prioritize
Um,
yourself.
Yeah, you do. And you need to find your voice. This is the self-esteem work that I do in helping people to build their confidence and articulate what they need, find their boundaries. It's all really important work. Tip 5 is to sometimes in the weeks sort of that build up to these special occasions, you can feel it. Like I'm quite, because I'm at work as an energy healer and as a
Mm.
coach, I'm very tuned into what my body feels. And so when my energy changes and it drops, I can kind of feel it. Like I know I need to give my grief some more space and
Mm.
more attention. And sometimes it's just like, oh my God, not again, like grief again.
Oh,
But there's many things that you can do. You can write letters, but when you write letters, express how you feel.
yeah.
You can let yourself cry, give yourself permission to cry. Benjamin J. Harvey, one of my mentors, he has a awesome quote. He's like, if you're going to cry, cry like, imagine that crying is an Olympic sport and you're going for gold.
Give it a red
Yeah.
hot
So just,
crack and do your best.
yeah, go hard. It's like if there's 300 tears, don't stop at 250. You just ride that wave all the way to shore. Go hard.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Another way that I give my grief time and space and attention is I do self-directed healing. So self-directed healing is an energy healing modality that works with deep pain
Hmm.
and sort of the thoughts, the mental challenges that we have. And as I do these sessions with my clients, I teach them how to heal themselves doing this process.
Hmm.
But sort of in a nutshell, it's what am I feeling? Where is it in my body? And then feel it more, like really lean in, get curious about those feelings that are going on in your body, the emotions. Coaching's powerful, therapy's powerful. There's so many things that you can do. Go for a walk, give yourself space, talk to a friend. It's all really, really powerful in
Yeah.
ways to give your grief some attention. I just want to, gratitude and meditation are really powerful, but if
Hmm.
you're using them to bypass your pain, you're just bypassing your pain. You're not healing.
Hmm.
So it can be a way of like a spiritual bypass. Some people will use meditation and gratitude practices and positive affirmations to almost stop the pain.
Yeah.
But if you're not processing and allowing the pain to be felt and witnessed and seen and move through the body, it's not actually healing. All you're doing is just burying it a bit deeper. And
Right.
sometimes what happens is that will come out later, like it'll surface, and that can surface as anxiety, overwhelm, panic attacks, depression,
Mm.
fatigue. It can come out, burnout. It can come out in many road rage, many different ways later. So
I imagine it can also come
that's
out as
just,
illness, though, as well.
oh, of course, yeah. 75 to
Mm.
90% of disease is caused by stress. That's the data, the research that's coming out now. So grief will manifest physically in the body. So
Mm.
when we don't process our emotions, they manifest physically. Our body talks to us.
Yeah.
We really need to, that self-awareness piece and learning to listen to your body is really
Mm.
important.
Well, mentally and physically, we're
Um,
connected. You can't differentiate. So, what what you feel in the mind is going to be felt in the body.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it manifests. So emotions and thoughts can be quite fleeting.
Hmm.
And so, for example, they can come and they can go. And if you're processing them and allowing them in healthy ways, they won't manifest in the body.
Yeah.
Um, but that, but if you don't sit with that energy and move the emotions and process the thoughts, what happens is it turns into a mood. So
Right.
emotions are fleeting, but moods is a state. And when you
Hmm.
get into that state, it's in the body. So
Yeah.
that's when I'm talking about anxiety, depression, mood swings, all that sort of stuff, the fatigue and that sort of thing. Does that make
Yeah.
sense, Anita?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. And it sounds like it's the sort of thing that we really do need to release. And like you were saying, not just push it down further, but actually work through it and release it. Otherwise, it manifests as illnesses.
Correct. Yeah. And we are raised in a culture that's learnt not to feel, especially our men.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, they're literally taught not to feel. They
Mm.
disconnect from it because boys don't cry. Get on with it. And so many of us, and also, a lot of women are disconnected from their emotions as well. It depends
Mm.
on how you were raised.
Yeah.
There's so many things that can happen along the way in our life that can shut us down. And that kind of disconnect is a trauma. It's a trauma response. And
Mm-hmm.
so we can also use the self-directed healing to reconnect back in with the part of you that you've lost, and
Yeah.
find that part of you and reconnect in and start to feel again. Usually it will start with feeling empty, feeling nothing. I feel nothing, but the pain is always underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning to connect with that, it's so empowering. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, really, those sessions are phenomenal.
Wow.
So with the tips, another tip is to have a plan. So it can be really helpful when you've got a special day coming up. And it's not unusual for grievers to have all their special days in it could be March, could be your month, or it might be
Yeah.
April, or it can be different for everyone to have like a heap of days in a row. Their birthday, other birthdays, anniversaries.
Mm.
And so for me, my son died in a car accident, Aaron. And so for me, Mother's Day is a really tough
Awful.
day.
Yeah.
And of course, for fathers out there, if they've lost a child or lost a parent, it's a tough day. Or if you're
Mm.
estranged from your children,
Yeah.
Mother's Day is really, really tough. So I talk to my mum and my daughter weeks in advance. That first Mother's Day, we were planning 6 weeks in advance to find something that we all felt okay about, that we felt we could do. We found a
Uh-huh.
beautiful historical homestead, and they had a cafe, and we went out there. It was lovely, and they had a museum, and I thought it was going to be the most awful day, and I actually had a really lovely day,
Oh,
because I surrounded myself with love.
yeah. And is it about perhaps starting a new tradition that you can do on that day to remember that person, that honors that person, in a way to try and move out of the sadness of the situation, to think, maybe for instance, if you lost a husband and they were a keen gardener, to go to a beautiful garden and say, okay, fine, we're going to walk around the botanical gardens on that day to honor that person. I
Yeah.
feel like to overlay the sadness of that celebratory day with a new tradition could be quite positive for
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's one of the tips, is like, you create the rules. So if
Yeah.
you need to create new rituals, if you need to create new traditions, this is a really
Mm.
great opportunity. And it's redefining your relationship with your loved ones. So, I have a new tradition. It's spaghetti bolognese nights. Because Aaron loves spaghetti bolognese and he used to cook that. So it's a way that we all come together. We put a
Lovely.
place for him at the table. It's different.
Oh,
Everyone has their own things.
yeah.
You can put a gift under the tree. Like, there's so many ways. I also do tributes. I have 2 tributes a year where I bring his friends and family together, and we cook a sausage sizzle, because he loves sausages sizzles, and sometimes I put out fairy bread because he loved fairy bread. So I just
Oh,
find ways to bring him
yeah.
into the experience. Yeah, but creating new traditions is a really great way to honor your loved one.
Mm.
And I love the idea of, if your person was someone who loved the garden, you could plant a plant every year,
Mm.
or donate a plant, or
Yeah.
like it. I've had I've had plants planted all around the world. I literally have a memorial garden out the front. So
Oh,
on the first anniversary, yeah, Aaron's first birthday, we did a mass planting. And then each year, people have added plants and I've added plants. So
that's
yeah,
beautiful.
that can be really, really useful. Yeah, there's many ways that you can do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those special occasions, if they're not planned ahead, you can get blindsided sometimes. So
Mm.
think ahead and set yourself up for success, and try to have something for those days, anniversaries, Valentine's Day, those types of days that you feel might be really tricky in advance.
Yeah.
Phone a friend, but you need to ask. You've got to remember that,
Yeah.
because people don't know. So if you know that their birthday is going to be really tough, and it's going to really upset you if Auntie Jo doesn't message you and remember, then you need to tell Auntie Jo in advance, hey, I just want you to know, with the anniversary coming up or the birthday coming up, it'd be really great if you could just message me. So you got to kind of ask for what you want.
Yeah. And that's empowering. That's
Finding
really
ways.
empowering.
Yeah, it is. Asking for what you want rather than just kind of waiting for things to happen and then being upset because it hasn't happened. It's like people are not mind readers.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not mind readers. And a lot of people are really bad at remembering special dates. Like the day of the death, if it's a death that is the loss that you're experiencing, is a significant date that the closest grievers will never forget. But the people on the peripheral, they probably won't remember that date. So if
Yeah.
that's a tough date, I have one friend and she's just like 2 weeks, a week before Mother's Day, she's just does a post going offline for the next week and a half. Don't want to be here. I'll be back later.
Okay. So that
And that's
sets
just
her
what she
up
does.
to create that space that she needs.
Correct. And if
Wow.
you think about, pregnancy losses, people who have miscarriages, for example, they might be out and they're on all these marketing databases, or someone who is getting married and the marriage doesn't happen.
Yeah.
They're on all these databases for marketing, and then all of a sudden the marriage didn't happen. They don't have their child, and they're getting Baby Bunting and all these
Oh,
places sending
God.
them all these promos, and it's really, really tough. So you've got to
Yeah.
be unsubscribing. You've got to get rid of that stuff as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
Um, really challenging. So another tip is
Yeah.
find ways to accept and include your grief, which is kind of a little bit about what we've already talked about.
Yeah.
But accepting and including your grief is, from an emotional perspective, we don't know how we're going to show up. So say, for example, you
Yeah.
show up and then you have a bit of a meltdown. Don't be harsh on yourself. Just, I really invite you to practice self-compassion and just let it be okay. It is okay to show emotion. You've just got to try to work towards that emotion being a healthy expression rather than unhealthy expression.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation that I won't go into on this podcast though. If people want to talk, if people don't want to talk, you've kind of got to honor where they're at, because I love talking about Aaron, but I absolutely respect that not everyone wants to have conversations about their loved ones. So,
Yeah.
it can be, oh, is it something? Ask the question. Are you happy to talk about them? How do you feel? Just get permission.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
someone doesn't want to talk, don't make them talk. It's because you think they should be doesn't mean they should be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Finding ways to honour your loved one on those special occasions is really important. And we're kind of brushed on that with the traditions, but I just want to take that a little bit further as well. If there is a graveside or an accident site or a special place, sometimes that can be nice. Some people have really strong rituals around that. Looking at photos, sharing photos. I put little videos together sometimes. You can put out frames. So you might want to make a donation to a cause in their
Yeah.
honour. You might like to say special prayers. You might like to set a place on the table or light a candle or share a gift. My mum has bought me gifts from Aaron, and I have bought Adele gifts from Aaron, and that's really, really
Oh,
beautiful.
that's lovely, actually.
Yeah, sharing stories, reminiscing, sitting around the table. I love doing that. But again, not everyone's cup of tea. We're all a bit
Yeah.
different.
I think
But
that can
creating
also
those rituals
depend
that
where
include
you are
them.
in that stage of grief as well. Like you said, to the
Correct.
mature stage of grief, if you're in that space, it's a lot easier to talk about it and talk about them as a person to keep their memory alive. It's a lot more comfortable, I imagine, rather than it being very raw grief. That would be very, very difficult.
Yeah. And you don't want to be in a position where you want to talk and no one will talk to you. That's
Yeah.
really isolating, and it's not having your grief witnessed. So when people shut you down and they can't have that conversation, you need to go find people who can have that conversation.
Yeah.
That's where grief support groups are really, really powerful, because you're around people who are prepared to have the conversation and who will witness your grief. So
Yeah.
sometimes you might not be able to get that support directly from the people closest to you. And sometimes, especially, when you have a couple that's grieving, you're used to leaning on each other, and then all of a sudden you can't lean on each other. So you need to get that support elsewhere.
Yeah. And
With special occasions also. Yeah,
I was
sorry.
just thinking of something to tie in what you said before, is to ask for what you need. Is if you do feel that you need to talk about the person, is maybe to have a friend, maybe who's not as deeply in the grief as you are, who maybe didn't know, maybe it was your partner who died and they didn't know your partner as much, and to set them up and say, look, I just want you to listen. I just need to talk about them. And to set that situation up for yourself so you can have those conversations, so you can almost get it off your chest that you do need to have those conversations, as opposed to speaking to somebody else whose grief is as raw as yours, who may not be in the place they want to speak about it. So to set yourself up
Yeah.
for success, to enable you to get what you need.
Yeah, exactly. It's you've got to reach outside for that support. So, be it friends or other family members, you kind of find your way.
Yeah.
If people feel very isolated and don't feel they have anyone to talk to, we're wired for connection. We need connection. That's where, grief support groups are really powerful. And talking to other people who have experienced a loss like yours, it's like equivalent to talking to five people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when someone really understands where you're coming from, even though I cannot understand someone else's experience because I haven't had their experience, I understand the impact of loss. And so that can be really powerful to be around people who understand and have experienced deep loss.
Yeah.
The stats, Anita, actually show that we'll all experience a significant loss every 8 to 9 years.
Oh,
And for
wow.
some people that can kind of
Okay.
accumulate and happen in really tight order, and for other people it might kind of stretch out and they might go 20 years without a significant loss. But we'll all experience loss. It's kind
It's
of
part of life.
part of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will all die. As morbid as that sounds, we have 100% mortality rate. So
There's no
it is
escape there.
inevitable. No, unfortunately.
Oh.
Another tip is to plan the meal. So if you're someone who's used to having a traditional meal and there's a lot of pressure on you to do that, it can be useful to just kind of see if you can let that pressure go. You could have frozen spaghetti. Like, it doesn't matter. Frozen pizza. It's about being kind and going easy on yourself. That's more important than it is to pull out this great meal just because you've always done it that way. So, really look after yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can cook foods that honour them as well, which can be nice, like you can create little things around that, which is cute.
I imagine for some people that is actually a really lovely process to say, I'm going to cook their favourite meal, and actually a lovely thing for you to do as well. So I imagine that would be variable for people.
Yeah. I love my spaghetti bolognese nights. They've become a thing.
That's so nice.
And the sausage sizzle's hilarious because Aaron snuck out one night and took the frozen sausages out of the freezer down to the local park and had a party in the park with his mates. And so the sausage sizzle, it's actually a joke because it's really, really funny. And so, that's why I do the sausage sizzles. It's quite funny.
But that's so lovely.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful way to remember him.
Yeah. He was
really
so fun and full of life, and, and he loved all that stuff. So another tip is to communicate with all the members of the family. So grief in families can be very complex because we all grieve differently. I've already said that.
Yeah.
And this is really tricky because some members might want to celebrate, some members might not. Some might have a very firm stance on what it looks like for them, and they might not be open to what other people feel, because what you've got to appreciate, especially in those first few years, is we're all just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But that looks different for everyone. For me, Christmas is very special. I have a beautiful Christmas tree, and we used to have a tradition around putting the Christmas tree up together and filming it on a slow-mo and all this stuff. And that first year when Aaron wasn't there for Christmas, my daughter wanted to put up the Christmas tree, but I didn't because it was triggering me. And we really had to actually sit down and talk about how we both felt. And I decided, even though it was hard for me, that she needed this and I wanted to honour her. So I did put the Christmas tree up, and sometimes doing it that first time is the hardest. Once you do it,
Yeah.
it gets easier.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this communication, it's really just checking in. We need to listen to everybody. Everyone does need a bit of a voice. So having those conversations around, look, this date's coming up. What do you want to do? What are your thoughts? How are you feeling? And then trying to navigate and find a pathway and a mutual ground that can kind of work for everybody. Because if you can get everybody on board, that's the best solution,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
And negotiating that, which can take, it can be tricky. But the other thing to remember with the family is you've got to include the children, because it's not unusual for the children to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So if there's children involved, then they're often what we call the forgotten grievers. They can get left behind, and I know this for a fact because I've worked with so many people in their 40s, 50s, and they lost a brother or a parent when they were a child under 20, and usually they don't have the resources to deal with that loss at that time.
Yeah.
And especially if they're just that little bit older, if they're above 10, they will step into and be caring for the parent or for someone else. And so their grief doesn't get witnessed
Yeah.
because other people in the family have bigger grief. So they can get left behind. So really learning to listen to the children and what they need can be really powerful.
Wow.
Looking after yourself is another tip. So those self-care tips, going for a walk, having a bath, bubble bath, like micro moments out in nature,
Yeah.
slowing it down, sleeping in if you need to sleep in. If you're stuck in bed and you can't get out of bed, I would invite you to just get up and have a shower and brush your teeth and go back to bed.
Yeah.
Everything is a win. Just do what you can, but you've got to
Yeah.
look after yourself. So rest when you need to rest. But remember that you still need to move and you still need to look after yourself.
Yeah.
And
And
lastly, of course, reach out for external support. So
yeah.
working with a professional who understands loss, who's experienced with loss, is really powerful to help move you through so that you're not sort of struggling and feeling like you're drowning, so that you
Yeah.
can get back to a place of kind of equilibrium again, where life, and renegotiate the new life that you now have to live.
Yeah.
So that's my tips.
Thank you. And also I think just to know that this will get better, this will get easier. Each day that you move forward, it will there'll be high days and low days. And I love your analogy with the wave, but to know that it will get easier each step of the way. I think, we were talking about a lot of
I don't
firsts.
necessarily agree.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Don't necessarily agree. I think, I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
I think that the quote or the saying, time heals all wounds, is one of the biggest myths that's caused the most damage in the world. Because the fact is time doesn't heal our wounds. What heals our wounds is if we're working and processing the pain and the energy. Because trust me, I've worked with people who are 10 years on, who are 15 years on, and they're stuck.
Yeah.
It can be like it's day one. So most people, yes, there's a normally there's a natural, normal sort of progression towards healing, but not all the time.
Yeah.
So time doesn't necessarily heal. It's what you do with your time.
Okay.
That's going to really empower you. Yeah. Because we need to learn how to live with our loss if it's a significant loss. Yeah.
I'm happy to be proved wrong on that. Thank you. It's good to clarify that
Well,
one.
I mean, it is. It's
important.
Yes, it does. And you're right. It does get easier, generally speaking, but not always.
Yeah.
So if someone's stuck, they need help.
Yeah.
But first they need to recognize that they're stuck. Because when you're in that state, you don't necessarily recognize it. Yeah.
Christy, thank you so much for these top tips.
Oh, you're most welcome.
And we will have...
Can I just talk?
Yes.
Sorry, can I just talk briefly about New Year's?
Sure. Yes.
I nearly forgot. New Year's is one of the hardest days for grievers.
Please elaborate.
And which totally blindsided me. I had no idea. And the reason is because there's a sense, New Year's is usually a time for celebration. It's like a new beginning. It's like we finish the year and we're moving into the new year. But what happens when you're experiencing a big loss, if someone's died, is that you're moving into a new year without your loved one.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're moving further away from them. And that's challenging. And so with New Year's, it's about finding ways to bring them with you into the new year. So you can think like, what parts of my grief do I want to leave behind?
Okay.
And what parts of my grief, or what is my grief journey going to look like this year? And what is my relationship going to look like with them this year? Because you're not moving further away from them. You're moving further away from the date they died or the date that the relationship broke down, but you're not necessarily moving further away from them. Because I feel very close to Aaron now.
Yeah.
I've managed to renegotiate and create a new relationship. So sort of understanding that, shifting the meaning around it, choosing to bring them on the journey with us. And that can look different for different people depending on their spiritual and cultural beliefs.
Yeah.
But creating meaning around, honoring them, creating meaning around their lives, bringing them, you might choose to bring them even closer into your heart this year, as the new year ticks over. You might choose to redefine your relationship with them. You might choose to create new rituals this year. You might choose to decide that you don't want to always feel sad this year, or that the guilt stories and all the things you think you could have done, maybe you might decide you want to work with that. So what do you want to leave behind and what do you want to bring with you? The other thing is for me, that first year, it absolutely blindsided me how much my grief came up on that first New Year's. And I was so lucky to be working with David Kessler at the time, because he shared what I'm sharing with you now.
Yeah.
And, I stopped at midnight and everyone's doing their kisses and hugs and everything. I did decide to go out because my girlfriend was down from another state. So I wanted to see her, but I actually paused and I actually spent time with Aaron, and I sent him love and a prayer and I connected with him at first. And then I went and did everything else. So I actually took myself away, took some time out, and then came back when I was ready.
Yeah.
So with all these special days, just to kind of tie this all back around, and you did mention this, they are just a date in the calendar. You get to decide what that date means for you, and you get to decide what significance you give it. So that's actually up to you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a nice way to kind of bring it all around.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christy. We'll have we'll have all the links where people can reach out and contact you as well. I know you've got some fabulous things on YouTube, and some really good tips that people can introduce, and where they can get help if they are really struggling. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
really, really useful.
And you're most welcome.
Just the awareness also, if you're not the griever, but you have somebody close to you that is grieving, and how we can best support them is so important. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And just for everyone, if they haven't gone back, make sure you go back and watch the last episode.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of information
so
there
much
as
in
well.
there. But thank you so much.
Yeah. And please reach out if anyone needs support, if there's someone you want to talk to about this. I do offer free discovery calls. So really inviting you to take that offer up. It's there for a reason, because I'm here. That's how I honour my son. I support people on their journeys as well.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, share and subscribe so you can stay updated with more from Midlife Unraveled. To see more Midlife Unraveled, follow us at midlifeunraveled.com or at Midlife Unraveled on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you soon.